So I'm really excited to have our entrepreneur story session. And yeah, we will actually split it in two parts. And for the first part, we'll talk to Vaitea from Enapter. Hello, Vaitea. Great to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And also Ikuo, who is joining us from Tokyo. And let's see if we can see you already. Hello, Ikuo. Great to have you here. And Ikuo will tell us in a moment what he does because it's a fascinating story. And then later on, we also have Wee Leng and also Knut join us. Yeah, let's kick it off, I would say. And Vaitea, let's start with you since you're right here next to my side. And tell us maybe, you're growing your own startup, Enapter, right now. Or you're also like operating from Berlin. So can you tell us just very briefly what does Enapter do, and also in the context of, let's say, innovation for more sustainable cities?
Absolutely. So Enapter is an electrolyzer manufacturer. An electrolyzer is a device that splits water into hydrogen and oxygen. And our mission is to replace fossil fuels. So the only way to do this is to make green hydrogen cost effective. And this is where we're at in our journey, mass producing electrolyzers. How did we even come across electrolysis technology was at the Pisua House, which is a self-sufficient home in Thailand, in Chiang Mai. And this house relies only on sun and hydrogen. That's it. Nothing else. And I was completely amazed by it. Right after finishing my studies, moved to Chiang Mai, saw this home, thought, who are these people coming up with these ideas? I must meet them. And this is how I met Sebastian and Jan, who are now today the co-founders of Enapter. And they had bought their electrolyzer system in their home from this company in Italy. And they are the manufacturer of the electrolyzer. So they've been developing this for over 10 years. And they were missing a bit of focus in their business growth. And so with Sebastian and Jan, we decided to help them. And Sebastian acquired their debt. Enapter was co-founded and created in November 2017. And this is how it all began, where we narrowed down the focus on the anion exchange membrane electrolyzer, and understanding, okay, how can we make more of them? How can we make them less expensive? How can we make them smaller? And since we've started now, we've come out with 2 different versions of the electrolyzer, making it already smaller, less expensive, more efficient, and now the focus is extending the lifetime, increasing the efficiency, and also understanding that energy companies of the future are not just hardware-based. They're also software-based. And so we've developed our energy management system. Our team here is in St. Petersburg, which is kind of extending our international reach. And here the idea of the EMS is to make it easy to integrate hydrogen, because hydrogen is only one piece of the puzzle. It cooperates with a whole ecosystem, right? Solar panels, inverters, batteries, fuel cells, all these components need to understand how are they performing. You need to set up rules, have predictive maintenance possibilities, and this is where we all come together as a team from a hardware perspective, software perspective, and now scaling up as well our operations soon in Germany.
Super interesting. So so you actually went to Italy first. So you had the idea in Thailand, you went to Italy then. To talk to the people that have been doing this. Now you are building a new, let's say, the next level of the tech as well. But what's your relation then also to Berlin? So because you're based here in Berlin, as far as
yeah. So Sebastian and Jan are from Hamburg, and when we were deciding where should Enapter grow, we were already well aware of Germany's involvement in hydrogen. There's a very clear strategy. Just recently, they also announced their whole hydrogen roadmap with a clear budget. And since the very beginning, Germany has been very clear that green hydrogen would be a future energy transition goal. And we thought, okay, we have to come to Europe. We will, of course, keep our production in Italy, but we also want to have our Hauptstadtbüro in Berlin, knowing as well already that we will scale up, and the scale up would take place in Germany.
Makes sense. And tell us maybe just a little bit, give us a better sense, specifically like use cases maybe on a neighborhood scale, on a city scale, on a district scale that we can, might in 5 or 10 years time, let's say Enapter rolls out their tech in the capital. Like what would be our new reality? What would it feel like? What would be the upsides, the benefits of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd like to start answering this question just more from a sense perspective and then going more into the technical side. But if a world was powered by hydrogen, it would be very quiet and there would be no smell of gas exhaustion pipes. So it would be a different reality where things are seemingly more calm. We can still get around. Nothing is holding us back, but it's much more quiet and there's no CO2 emission. So just from a sensorial perspective, it changes. If we start at an individual perspective, how would my life change if I were running on hydrogen? We have some use cases, for example, in Germany or in Italy or also in the UK, where homeowners are generating their own power on site. They have solar panels installed with inverters, and then our electrolyzer is plugged in. When the batteries are full, then the hydrogen production starts, so that in the evening or also in the winter, hydrogen can be used for long-term energy supply. It's a fantastic case for seasonal storage, for example, in remote locations when you can go to France in the Alps and you have this chalet running on hydrogen. But when we are in the city, at an individual perspective, it's really taking ownership of your energy production and being fully independent on that side.
And you are also doing a project with Greenpeace, right? You mentioned.
Yeah, so we were part of their Smart Grow Accelerator program, and it's quite an interesting one as we are developing the business case for not only power for a neighborhood, but also heating a neighborhood, because hydrogen is a gas, and we already have a natural gas grid infrastructure built out, and we can inject the hydrogen into the natural gas grid, which is a way to decarbonize heat, which is very difficult to electrify. So this is still in the development stage, but in the Netherlands, with DNVGL, the community of Rotterdam, and the gas network operator Stedin, we already have a power-to-heat application running where we have an apartment complex that is running with its hydrogen container in the back to power, to provide heat in the winter.
Cool. It indeed sounds like the future, like a much nicer future, if I can imagine, being just completely free from fossil fuels and also just with the noise, with the smell, everything you mentioned. I think we can get a good sense of it. I would maybe now switch to you, Ikuo, to also give you the chance to, again, introduce yourself a little bit. You have a very special relationship to Asia Berlin Summit as well, because you're also one of the ambassadors to it. So, but also we briefly in the panel before, we already spoke of one very special company that's just recently, also last week, made the headlines again of raising their Series C funding, which is Infarm. And Infarm, maybe tell us what Infarm does, what's your involvement with Infarm coming to Japan? We can hear well. Please go ahead, yeah.
I'm not alone, so could you give me so I'm not able to make a screen share. Could you give me a right?
Let's see, we're checking in the back here. If not equal, just even without the slides for the moment while we're trying to figure this out.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Ikuo Hiraishi, based in Tokyo, and I'm a serial entrepreneur, also angel investor and running small funds. And right now, I am running Infarm Japan as a ONT subsidiary of Infarm GmbH, headquartered in Poland. And what Infarm does is growing a vegetable inside of supermarkets, restaurants, just in front of the customers and consumers. That's our business. The reason and also Berlin as one of the destinations where we hosted our country event. And Infarm was the first winner uh, at the Innovation Weekend Berlin. And the idea was all the winners and the runners-up from a single city had been invited to Tokyo to compete for the Grand Champion of the Year. And so that's why we invited Infarm to Tokyo, and then Infarm won the Grand Champion winner in the 2015 season. So that's the story. We met each other. And I'll make a long story short, but so we were thinking and planning to expand into the Japanese market. And then eventually we established the Infarm Japan, a subsidiary of Infarm German headquarters, parent company, February this year. And I have become managing director in Infarm Japan. So that's the story. If you would like to ask me anything, please.
Great, thanks a lot, Ikuo. So both of I actually have a question to both of you and Vaitea as well. So both of you are active in Japan. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome to go to Japan, let's say with a European product, if you want to say so? And maybe Vaitea, or Ikuo, we can start with you and then we get to Vaitea.
No. I would like to pass on to the sorry, I don't remember her name. But,
Vaitea, yeah, okay. Sure, Vaitea, go ahead.
Okay, sure. So our systems are generating hydrogen at 35 bar, and Japan has a completely different regulation for this, and they need hydrogen at 8 bar. So it's not really about adapting the electrolyzer completely differently, but it's about acknowledging it by making some technical modifications from the pressure valves and the gauge. So we just have to remember, okay, when we're shipping to Japan, we are making a different system. So this was one of the key points that we really do need to keep in mind, because it's the only, we know that when an 8-bar system is coming out, it's always flying to Japan. So I would say this was one of the challenges from a technical perspective. Language is always quite a tricky one as well to be sure that we can communicate. So we have a colleague that is German and speaks fluent Japanese, which is extremely helpful. But when we attend trade shows, we also now are joined by students that are into electrochemistry and want to know more about what we're doing and also get involved, and they've been also helping out. And then translating our website to Japanese was also a key element to be sure that this door is open and that there's no communication barriers, because green hydrogen is really international. It's an international solution.
What were some, I can also imagine, you know, you guys are busy like every startup with a million things, but then like what's the point where you also as a founder, you actually feel comfortable to put in that investment to, you know, translate your whole website to Japanese, to like, you know, maybe get someone on staff, you know, who does speak Japanese. Like what's because it seems to always be like a tricky, you know, what's the right balance when to go all in? And
yeah, absolutely. I think you really underestimate actually how much work it's going to take to translate your website into 8 different languages, and especially if you want to make it organically and not make your website sound like a robot, especially with like style in French or German and Japanese. It is a challenge. But what we've realized and what we appreciate about the Japanese market, although there is a time challenge where whereas, for example, in Germany, you may not meet your customer ever, and they'll just place an order and they're happy with it, and okay, maybe you meet them in a year. In Japan, we've met some now customers last year, and we developed the relationship for a whole year where we're constantly present and we're in touch, but we know that this trust has been established and they are loyal customers. It's the time investment that you make in the beginning, maybe for 1 year, but the business relationship that continues doesn't really have an end date. So it is worth the investment because you know that there is loyalty, there is trust, and you've made it through the hard part, and now it's just about continuing to work together.
How can you create this trust right now in this crazy year that we have, where travel is like, you know, such a problem?
It is a big challenge. However, since we haven't well, actually no, in Japan this year there was still the fuel cell expo that was held during the Smart Energy Week in Tokyo, so we were still able to meet some new partners, some new customers, and that was kind of like our last chance to really enter into to Japan and to be present. And I think the trick here is always being present, always being there, always having an open ear. And it's a bit of a challenge because it's only one of our colleagues that speaks Japanese, and he's also involved with many other German-related topics in business development. So yeah, I would really just advise to just be patient and also understand that it is a different business culture. There is a different etiquette, and there are different milestones to hit before you make a sale. And it's not really about, it's not a hard sell. It's much more about understanding your counterparts and understanding as well the business organization in Japan and the hierarchy that does exist, as opposed to the flat hierarchy we have at Enapter. So taking these things into consideration does go a long way.
Great, thanks for those insights. Ikuo, tell us your story. What were some of the challenges, some of the maybe difficult moments also that you found?
Actually, so excuse me, so could I see your place on the window as well? I just see my face, you know, double. It's not comfortable for me, actually. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I see.
I would like to see you, and I would like to Vaitea.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how should I pronounce your name.
Oh, you're quite close, Vaitea.
Vaitea, okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Let's see if we can switch
Thanks.
the view. Yeah, exactly. Now we can switch the view that in the stream, I think people see you. We won't see you now,
so
but
still I can see your venue, unfortunately.
Okay, go ahead.
So
now you're small.
Actually, I really agree with Vaitea. So everything she mentioned. So language barrier is a very, very big challenge for the foreign startups who are interested into the Japanese market. So except the some industries, for example, internet-related, I mean IT-related industries, or finance, fintech, AI, except those kind of industries, even though the kind of executives or higher level people do not speak any decent language. So that is a very critical the challenge for foreign startups. And also, as she mentioned, the culture is very, very different from the ones in European countries. So the challenge is Infarm has been facing with is almost of them already told by Vaitea. So I don't know what should I add on her topic, but
maybe Ikuo, I don't know if it's maybe you have a funny anecdote to share or something like this. If not, I have right away another question to both of you, actually, also in terms of like when you feel when is the right time, for a company from Europe to say, look and go east?
It's a very difficult question. I don't think we can tell the answer in general. The right timing is it all depends on the every single startup. So it depends.
But on the experience of let's say Infarm, like you mentioned that they went through the award, they came to Tokyo, and it seems like also the product had a certain maturity. It how you then jumped on board to really like set it up for them. What were some of the conditions at the time, right, that made all of this possible?
Okay, understood. So in general, most of the people or companies or even the startups or big corporations, in terms of the foreign startups or innovation happening outside of Japan. Of course, it depends on the industries where people are living, but the Silicon Valley is still almost the only destination or the agenda they are interested in. So to get the attention and to appeal to the Japanese audience is very difficult from the European startups. That is the truth in general. So that's the first one. And the second one is to come into the Japanese market, as she mentioned, it requires them or us very long time to establish the kind of trust as a relationship. So that's why it also means the financial condition should be kind of robust. So that's why Infarm was very much interested in coming to the Japanese market when Infarm was still seed on the early stage, but we needed to wait until we established the decent business and kind of anyway develop the business in the home ground, I mean European market. So we needed enough cash to be able to wait for a long time and the possible endurance. So the finance situation would be the second condition to evaluate if this is the right time. And the third one is, of course, we need to understand the Japanese market. So we need to conduct the feasibility study or etc. Anyway, preliminary assessment. So to make those study, as this is also mentioned by Vaitea, so someone you need someone who speaks the Japanese, I mean bilingual stuff. So those three conditions are the things you need to think when you decide to come into the Japanese market. I think this is still in general, but based on my experiences, I think so.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Ikuo. Vaitea, what's your take on this?
Yeah, no, I think this was very wise advice. As a startup, you do get quite excited about new markets and you're just like, let's go, especially if it's Tokyo, there is this excitement. But I think having yourself established somewhere before just fanning yourself out is always the better decision. But I think at the same time, we saw specifically for our industry that both Japan and Germany were very active in hydrogen. There is a strategy that's been set out. Japan has coined itself as a hydrogen society. Had there been the Olympics this year, it would have been a whole showcase for hydrogen. So we already had this confidence that hydrogen, there was a national commitment to hydrogen. So we knew that there was interest in green hydrogen. So we felt confident to go there and to be present, because when we think about the energy transition, it really has to happen at a global scale. It's a question of international cooperation. It's just, we will be as strong as the weakest link. And I think Japan is a fantastic partner to move forward in terms of bringing, in terms of scaling up green hydrogen adoption.
And you mentioned also already that your product, needs to build a lot of trust. That's not a hard sell. But so is it an option for you to scale in the sense like through a reseller at all, or would it always be like, you're in control of the process of the relationships you're developing, let's say in-house?
Yeah, I think working with a trading partner gives you a lot of advantages because they have already established a relationship as well with the end user, whether it's most often it's a company, it's more B2B sales. So I think it really works in pairs to establish a relationship with a trading company or another type of partner, and also to still be, you know, independent, still have your own contacts, have your own flexibility as well to operate in the Japanese market, so you can really come at it from both sides.
Were there any, maybe to finish up also, were there any surprises when, in general, doesn't need to be related to to Japan now, but like in general, like coming from Europe, going to Asia, anything unexpected that happened?
Yeah, I can share too. I mean, one of the surprises was, I mean, yeah, it's more like something that we learned, and then more of like a funny anecdote. So something that we learned is, yeah, when we came out with the latest models, we sent out our latest data specs, and then we realized, oh no, we used the standard model, which is the European one, and it didn't say 8 bar, it said 35 bar. Here goes all of our credibility, and it was a bit of a challenge. We're like, oh no, we just sent them we didn't adapt it, even though it was the same system. So lesson learned. Really remember that you are dealing with a completely different market and adapt adapt your specs. And then in terms of how we've surprised them, I think they're always quite surprised that Sebastian is our chairman, and he is the eldest, and he is, yeah, kind of the one in charge. So from a hierarchical perspective, he would be the top guy. But it's most often actually his son, Jan, and I that are partaking in the relationship building in terms of trying out the whiskey distilleries and, yeah, spending some time developing their relationships.
That doesn't sound too bad to me as a side effect. Ikuo, is there anything surprising, anything funny, maybe an anecdote you have when it comes to the, let's say, European-Asian bridge building?
Actually, I'm Japanese and I'm based in Tokyo. So to me, there are no funny things, unfortunately or fortunately. So, but one thing I learned from the Infarm business so far is the concept and recognition toward the LED and hydroponics based vegetables are very different from the ones in Europe and the ones in Japan. So simply speaking, of course, it depends on people and the regions, but some of the people still have a negative perception toward the LED hydroponics based produced vegetables, because those people love naturally growing harvested vegetables to such a kind of, how should I say, technology driven vegetables. That is a very big hurdle we need to tackle and we need to get over. So, but because of the lots of typhoons and climate change and global warming and lots of natural disasters happening in Japan, it's themselves are very, unfortunately for Japanese people, of course, but those things kind of, getting people understand and change their mind, how we can keep the kind of sustainable agriculture versus natural traditional agriculture. And the other issue is the average age of the farmers in Japan is 67 years old, very old, and the average age of those people to be retired is 75 years old, meaning we have another 7 or 8 years. So that's why as long as we can develop the kind of alternative or the solutions or the methodologies, so we cannot keep the other vegetables and the foods for Japanese people if we don't import anything. But to import those things, as I mentioned at the beginning, so that's requires to spend the lots of energies and gasolines and generate the CO2, etc. So then people are getting to realize LED and hydroponics produce the vegetables, one of the very good alternative the ways and the solutions. So that is what I learned from the journey of Infarm so far.
I think you're making a very good point that at the end of the day, yes, we talk about expanding to foreign markets, but it's very much also expanding to different cultures. And I think that also means demographics, like other societal debates, discussions that we always need to keep in mind when we do that. Thank you so much, Vaitea and Ikuo, for joining us for this.
Excuse me, could I add one more thing?
Yes, of course, please. Go ahead.
During the how should I say, when we were thinking and planning to, and also getting the clients, actually in the Infarm, we had lots of fights. The people in headquarters at the beginning, of course, including the founders, they understood the Japanese market and the differences, but someone didn't at the beginning. So we sometimes had a very serious fights, actually. But at the end of the day, so they understood, and I also understood why they didn't, appreciate the what I told about the Japanese market, etc. So we needed time, even internally. So that is the other lesson learned from the Infarm business.
That's a very, very important point as well. Thank you so much, Ikuo. Thanks especially, joining us all the way from Tokyo. And let's give it a round of applause, I would say. Perfect. And so next up, thank you, Vaitea. I'll invite Knut and Wee Leng. Please come up on stage with me for our next two entrepreneur stories. All right, lovely to have you here as well. We'll do the same format, and maybe I'll start with you, Wee Leng. Tell us a little bit also, what you do, or maybe first, let me start a little bit with your background, because you are, let's say, a go-to-market specialist. So that is a very useful skill when we talk about scaling. And especially, you're from Singapore. As I gather, you worked a lot with big brands like Apple and Siemens in Southeast Asia, helping them to go to different markets. And I've myself lived in Singapore studied there, backpacked a lot back in the day, and I was amazed by the diversity of the place, of the whole region as well. So how can you what does it mean? What makes a good go-to-market strategy? Maybe just from you as a go-to-market strategy expert to begin with.
Yeah, sure. Hi, pleasure to be here. It's really great to come back here. I've been attending as an attendee for the last few years, and great to speak now. To your question on strategy, I think coming from the region and having helped companies from overseas trying to expand into different markets within a region, I think what's really important is that we are looking at a strategy for a specific market. And a company's strategy for specific markets can be really sometimes quite different from the overall company strategy. And it all boils down to the objective of what you're trying to achieve in the market, because it can be really different depending on the competitors that are already in there, the culture that's present in that market, and really most importantly, the kind of resources that you have and are willing to spare at that moment in time. So just give you an example, my experience back in Apple, right? Apple, as we know, when they started out as a company and they were trying to get their products out to consumers, retail was a very big part when they expanded in the US. But when they went into Southeast Asia, for the longest time, it was only up till 5 years ago that they first had their first Apple retail store in Singapore, first in the region. But before that, for more than 10 years before, they had a education team just focusing on trying to build relationships with the schools, trying to get adoption. And adoption was their objective of what they want to achieve in the market. They wanted people to get in touch with the products. So on the retail front, they worked through partners, channel partners, they had distributors, but they left it aside. And when they did go into retail and build that retail store, it was really about building a community around it. So they built, and it was still focused on adoption. They have now entrepreneurs, they have artists coming in, sharing about how they utilize the product, and that was why they had that retail store to engage with the community. So in that sense, you know, a good strategy needs to be relevant to the market. It needs to be relevant to the kind of resources that you have at the point in time, and also, the maturity of the market demands at a point in time. Yeah.
I think that sounds very reasonable, and it's a super interesting story from Apple, how they went about it. So you came to Berlin like about 3 years ago, and you actually now founded your own startup, your own, let's say, like idea baby you want to develop from here on topics like sustainability as well. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, idea baby is quite a nice, sweet term for it. Yes, it is still infant stages, but I came to Berlin 2 years ago because, you know, the startup scene here is really vibrant. It gives a different international perspective to, you know, the market expertise that I've had for Southeast Asia just by living here, working with people here. And my passion has always been in environmental sustainability, and very much the idea of like circularity in the economy, but more so the social aspects of how people are it's very much a social issue when it comes to, let's say, waste management problems with single-use disposals, packaging, excessive packaging in products. And when I started getting into upcycling, I looked around me and it's like, hey, there's so many things that we use on a daily basis that just serve one single purpose, and it could be sometimes not necessary. So how do we make use of these materials and items and bring it back so that they can live again as a different product or in a different life, repurposing them, reusing them. So the idea for what I'm doing right now is really creating a platform where people can crowdsource for materials that they require. So you stop having to buy new things every time you want to create something. People, when there is demand for items that you would usually throw away on a regular basis, you stop throwing them away because you start pegging a value that, hey, this can contribute to someone else's project. So yeah, that's the whole idea, is to inject circularity back in the community and not just leaving it back into the infrastructure and systems where very much nowadays we focus on recycling. But recycling as a process itself takes up resources, energy, and you know, it could at the end of the day still be recycled, but maybe that same thing could have lived another 4 or 5 lives in someone else's home. Yeah.
So what's the name of it?
It's called GalleRe. So the idea is that you recreate, you reinvent, you repurpose, you reuse things over and over again.
What's your general feeling also of, let's say, the appetite of Southeast Asia as a region? You know, when we talk about urban tech, we talk a lot about, like, you know, fossil-free, maybe even climate, not just climate neutral, maybe even climate positive, like cities. That's right, the ambition where we want to get. We know that kind of like Singapore is the poster child that everyone talks about. We had Ayesha give a keynote earlier today from there, which, you know, provided some incredible insights. But as a region for Southeast Asia, what do you feel is the appetite for even those things like that you're working on now with your own company in terms of circular economy?
Sure. So as a Singaporean, I'm very proud that the country is doing a lot towards going smart nation, but also having like a huge, a big ambition for climate change, because we have set aside like 100 billion just to tackle the climate change issues by 2050, right? That's a huge amount. But for other parts of Southeast Asia, they're faced with a lot of climate change challenges as well, especially geographically, you know, floods and just heat, temperatures, sea level rising, parts of the cities, parts of the countries going underwater regularly. The big cities like Bangkok, Ho Chi Minh, Jakarta, they've been getting increasingly under water issues, floods, but also the water systems, right? So I'd say there is a huge appetite for urban tech, but unlike Singapore, where the whole country is urbanized and it's an urban city in itself, they also have many other, they have large rural areas that they have to look into. So yes, Bangkok, Jakarta, they are very densely populated cities with millions of people living in there. And it's important for the country, but the outside, so the outside of these big cities, there are also these rural areas where they're looking into agriculture, farming, fishing. So a lot of money has actually been going also into, so for example, Indonesia. A lot of money have been going to startups who are doing like smart fishing, urban farming, but not just because they need to keep it within a small city space, but because of the natural environment that has kind of been eroded over time, that fields are getting worse. They need to get more efficient with the kind of minerals that they have available within their country. So I'd say, yes, there is a huge appetite, but not just what we know of as a smart urbanized solution. Yeah.
You just mentioned smart, or you just mentioned like like environment. This is exactly the topic now, Knut. Let's come and hear a little bit more also about what you are working on, because what I find interesting is in your role with Green Steps and the ARC, that I hope you can tell us now a little bit more about. Your idea actually came from China. You lived for many years. You're originally Austrian. You lived for many, many years in Shanghai, and you started your business from Shanghai, now actually on a mission, let's say, to bring it back to Europe, which is also fascinating to hear from this. But let's start first, like tell us about Green Steps. What's the idea behind it in terms of nature education and also of ARC?
Yeah, so thank you for having also me here. I'm recently back. I'm only since 2 weeks back after 20 years living in China. And we are scheduled to set up our operations here. What is Green Steps? Green Steps is a startup at the intersection of ecology, education, and IT. Why so interdisciplinary? Because we think there's obviously a climate crisis. There is a tremendous crisis in education, in case you haven't noticed. And we believe that there is tech available to really do social and environmental good. And we're basically siphoning off all the good mechanisms of Facebook, Airbnb, and whatever it is, and we try to put this into a new platform that aggregates environmental education. And I can make a personal note. So you mentioned I'm Austrian. It's true. Austria was, as a matter of fact, the first country to introduce compulsory education for the entire population. I think it was only 4 years. That happened somewhere in the 1780s. For the entire population. I don't say for a bourgeois elite, for the entire population. And we've been discussing this actually this weekend. We really need to ask ourselves nowadays, what kind of education do we need to deal with all the problems that we face? And we believe it is environmental education in a very wide spectrum. How to deal with agriculture. What Ikuo mentioned really gives me the chills, because farmers are basically dying out in Japan. I don't think we can solve this only with technology. We need to get people, young people, interested to actually pick up this job. And this is basically what we do. We started in China because we saw with our own kids and in a circle of families. I'm a multiple social entrepreneur. I founded a kindergarten, a parents-initiated kindergarten in Shanghai 11 years ago. And we saw that there is little access to nature, and we wanted to just increase this. And then I was digging into the entire mental health issue, nature deficit disorder, autism, and so on and so forth. And I actually observed a couple of really serious cases. And we drove this even further, and we realized Suicide rates, especially also child suicide rates, something that I was not aware of that it actually exists, are highest in Far East Asian countries. In China, there's a big censorship about this topic, but a lot of children are very, very unhappy because there's such pressure in the education system, and it's all indoors. It's all cram schools on the weekends. I can tell you, I've witnessed myself a child burnout incident of an 8-year-old. It's a tremendous experience. And since I'm a father of 2 myself, I really felt, you know, I leave the corporate world and bring my knowledge into this kind of endeavor. And I found a great partner, John, a really brilliant outdoor educator, and a Chinese partner who is helping us with all the cultural issues also in Asia. And so we moved forward, developed the training to make it really easy for adults and young people to guide children into nature. And then we realized that this is not enough. If we really want to scale, we need to address the fragmentation of environmental education. And if you go into this subject, you realize there's a lot of great content out there. There are Boy Scouts active since 100 years. There are nature friends active since 150 years. There are many new or recent organizations like Sierra Club in the States that do a great job, but it is all fragmented across organizations and across nations. And our approach with this platform is to unify it, because in the end, it's about the impact. It is not who is doing it, it is really about how do we create a better future. And the ARC is this integrated platform which we actually see as a social network, because every user has its own profile, and you can think of it like a Facebook profile or a LinkedIn profile where you only have 2 KPIs. One KPI is total hours spent on environmental education, no matter in which organization or where. And the second KPI is what we call a bioregional identity. So bioregional identity is a new kind of organizational concept. It's not coming from us. There are tremendous scientists working about this. It's about biodiversity conservation. They broke down the planet in about 900 territories, averaging the size of Switzerland, with an almost identical stock of plants and animals. And we think that this is what should be now a compulsory curriculum to connect to your environment. You need to know what is out there and not just know what is in the supermarket. That's the story.
Wow, this was incredible, really fascinating. Also to hear about, you know, your personal motivation, because I think when we talk about entrepreneurship, you know, at least to me, this is always the most exciting part of it. You know, where does this motivation to affect change, where does it come from? Knut, just because we also know each other from a broader context, actually a program called City Makers, which was also funded by a German foundation, Bosch Foundation, for the last couple of years, trying to bring those kind of change makers from China and Germany or Europe together. What has been now with your team, since you are very international and you have part of your design people and so on also from based in Italy, for instance, like how does it work also on day by day, like running this, like, you know, still with a fairly small team, but like running and trying to capture two huge markets like this, and also just doing the day by day, you know, with all the time difference and so on.
So, I mean, the upside is definitely we are really international. So we have in our software development team 2 people from Ghana, 1 from Mauritania, 2 French, Italian, Spanish, Belgium, Chinese, obviously, from all over China. So it's for me, this was always my dream to really work in a very international environment and have this cultural diversity, having also different input like on hand to have a faster iteration when you work on projects. This is great. The downside is, of course, that during Corona, we really suffered a lot to keep people just moving. In a startup, I believe remote work doesn't really function well. You need to be very close, working with each other and driving things. And in terms of setting up now the European operations, For us, it was necessary to come to Europe because we saw that in terms of social development, the Chinese society, I think, is not ready really to pick up our idea, at least the government part. We have a lot of support from civil society, but the government is not ready. And we deal with daily operations to have very clear weekly scheduled meetings that are usually around 2 o'clock China time. And that works well. Why? We apply Frédéric Laloux's reinventing organization principles. I don't know if you've heard of them. So we have a lot of self-management. We believe in wholeness, no fixed work hours. So we have people who are climbing instructors and they just want to work at night until 5 a.m. and the rest of the day, because they're young and very agile, they want to be in the mountains. And this so far works quite well. I have to say I'm a bit traditional because I come from a top-down corporate world. It really challenges me quite often, but it helps bridging also Asia and Europe in terms of time difference.
No question actually to both of you, but it comes from a discussion we have had earlier, Knut. You told me China matters. China as a region matters, like also when you want to affect scale, you want to affect change in this world, no matter where, let's say, you launch as a company, China as a region matters. And for that matter, I would also then, we can briefly talk about Southeast Asia, but maybe what's your thinking behind this? Why do you say this?
Yeah, to just answer this in one line, I mean, it's a quarter or a fifth of the total population on this planet, and they are very impactful consumers. But with a little story, the way I met Joan is when he facilitated at the mouth or the delta of the Yangtze River, and it is the confluence with the Huangpu River, the largest river of Shanghai and the largest river of China and one of the largest of the world. He facilitated an activity, a cleanup, which we now call plastic pirates. And we were wading in really knee-high styrofoam. And he has this great experiential learning approach that you do this together as a family, as a team, Boy Scout teams, and you discuss actually what you pick up, and you have a sharing, and you make up a story. You see there's, I don't know, Korean letters on the styrofoam, there's Japanese letters on the packaging. You find all different kinds of waste, and then you start to talk, so where did this waste come from? And John then put science into those activities, and we learned from this activity that almost half of all plastic waste in the oceans is coming from the Yangtze River, one river alone. So I actually shared the slide before, and I would like to share it afterwards. That's science. And I think the Yangtze River, to a certain extent, exemplifies the impact on China on our world in every regard. It's not only solid waste, it's emissions. So we need to integrate Chinese consumers, bottom-up citizens, if we cannot integrate the Chinese government.
Wee Leng, I mean, same story for ASEAN, isn't it? Southeast Asia, because I recently heard now it's around 600-700 million people as well.
I think size-wise, Southeast Asia is definitely not as huge as China, and it doesn't function as one country, right? It's so disparate, it's diverse. But what Southeast Asia really has is the youth and the people. So it's a huge growing region. A lot of it is super young, it's developing, rising middle income groups. So over the next 10 years, you know, the purchasing power of the region is going to really double and make an impact across the world. But I'd like to bring in China again into this conversation, because what Southeast Asia feels a lot of times is the spillover effects of China. Because even on something as simple as environment, climate change issues, when China now starts looking seriously into what their country wants to do or not with waste and recycling activities in relation to outside other parts of the world, like they've stopped receiving imports for waste. You know, we can't export waste into China anymore. Other parts of Southeast Asia are now suddenly overwhelmed with all the waste that wants to go into them. And what this means is then that they are now having to look at the regulations again and start putting up barriers for other countries around to stop exporting their waste over. And Singapore, as a small nation, we export a lot of our waste to our neighbors. What happens now is that waste companies in the country find it really unprofitable to manage waste because it's so expensive. You'd literally have to pay people to take in the waste, right? So when when China sneezes, the world catches a cold kind of thing. It does really have a huge influence across the region, and then because this is a big part of the world, and the spillover effects just like ripples on. Yeah, is what I like to add.
We briefly touched on it with our two speakers beforehand. Let's say the mentality in Japan. What would you say? What's the general openness to like also using new technologies like you are developing yourselves, but like just new solutions? The openness, let's say, of cities, Chinese in China versus also maybe like across the region, like to experiment, to you know, have an agile mindset and like test and try, something that sometimes we all feel here living in Europe we are just too slow at. We are not like really like, you know, open enough to failure as such. What's the mentality in the two regions?
Yeah, I guess you're asking a question almost like, why did we decide to set up operations in Europe? I believe there's a tremendously fast acceptance of new technologies and apps and everything in China, but only when they're approved by the government. And since 2017, Xi Jinping did a great job to really destroy the civil society. I'm saying this openly here because it is a huge issue and a lot of people are really having a problem with that. But the civil society is a pillar of any society. And if you want to bring certain solutions, you know, you want to make them become viral or have an impact, you need the support of non-corporate environments and non-government environments. So we're talking with Naturfreunde, Nature Friends in Germany. It's a huge organization with 70,000 members. If we would be doing this in China, no way to do this without the government. We need an approval first. So yes, on one way, or on the one hand, maybe in Europe we're slow, but in some parts of society, actually things can still move faster, I believe.
I think from my point of view, there's this scrappiness, and like in a good way, that comes with the region, be it Southeast Asia and even China, where things a lot of times just get rolled out without having to be perfect or perfected, and people in general are very receptive towards just using something that's almost just half-baked, right? Because they need something to kind of function and move along first. Whereas I think over here in Europe, there is, let's just say, a legacy of things that have worked well, right? I think it was mentioned in a previous session as well. And people are used to it, and when there's something new, there's always there's more skepticism, like, will it work as well as the last? And if something doesn't work as well, you're like, it's not as good. And therefore, let's just say the appetite or the environment for new things to just scrappily be adopted and started is a little bit more difficult, I find. Whereas, you know, back in Southeast Asia or in Asia in general, I would say we're just more used to things not working. And then, you know, we just find out what works within that thing that doesn't work perfectly, and then we use those features, right? Like, for example, WeChat. Honestly, I think there can be so many ways that the user interface can be, a user experience can be better, right? But it just worked with pretty, to be honest, messy interface and just had all the functions that people need. And they don't mind just having to tap a few more times to get to what they want, but they know it's there. So yeah, that's how they grow. And then you just keep growing on it.
That sounds like a perfect metaphor. So I just want to finish this up by asking you guys, you know, you're obviously very socially, environmentally driven in the best sense of, let's say, like social entrepreneurship, having a social problem or cultural environmental problem, and you try to address that through the means of like entrepreneurship. And how can people get in touch with you? How can they help you also, either as partners or through any other kind of support that you might be looking for right now?
You want to go first? Yeah, sure. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. You can always find me there. Right now, I mean, every startup needs, but I think what really is important right now is for the platform to prove its worth. And I would really love to speak to people who have projects that you think, you know, could involve circularity in your process. So it could be something as simple as, you know, this bottle here. Say you're Infarm and you're trying to build your garden plots out of, you know, used glass bottles instead of having to buy and set up a completely brand new garden fencing system. Or you could be an artist, you know, you're trying to create art installations and you don't want to have to purchase new materials to create them. You can make them out of old paper, old plastics. Yeah, schools, you know, you have projects that involve children to learn about the environment. What better way is it than, you know, doing beach cleanups, going through this packaging, giving them to another organization to make into something else and being able to see what that could become. And that's, I think, the best way to really help people see and be inspired that, hey, what we produce and throw away actually has a lot more value than how we associate to them. Yeah.
And Knut.
Yeah, I mean, we are now on a very clear trajectory. We have come here also to Berlin to present what we have developed over the last 6 months, really in terms of software development. And we start the beta phase with a couple of selected beta users on October 1st. And we were lucky to get funding from the European Union, small funding, to hold a summit, a youth environmental education summit in the Austrian-Hungarian National Park in spring, where we will present the production version. So we will continuously grow the number of organizations that have environmental education content and want to add this to the ARC because they believe that only together we can solve this crisis. And to get in touch with us, I mean, all interested organizations and environmental education professionals are invited to, of course, reach out to us.
And are you planning anytime soon to fundraise as well?
Well, we are always on the fundraise, of course, yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wee Leng from GalleRe and Knut from Green Steps ARC. To everyone else out there, definitely check them both out, check out what they are working on, and thank you guys so much for this really exciting, also very personal conversation we're able to have here. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.